Welcome to the season finale, season 3's finale for Kyle and Nick on Film. We're going to make a couple connections today with some French cinema. Nope, just French connections with American cinema. Yeah. Join us today as we talk Popeye Doyle in...
Cloudy.
There you go. Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Kyle Goethe from GoatFilmReviews.com.
I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast, and thanks for finding this, thanks for watching, and for our loyal fans, thanks for continuing to support the show. You can find great options for our Patreon to support us. Check out that as well. You can follow the show on Twitter and Instagram. Today we're going to talk about the Best Picture from 1971. I think it captures all the movies we covered of great films of 1971. It's going to encapsulate all of them. We cut the top 4. This is it, The French Connection.
So police detectives Popeye Doyle and Buddy Russo have learned about a possible heroin smuggling ring entering New York out of Marseille. Popeye Doyle, a bigoted alcoholic, finds that his unwavering obsession towards catching the criminals may cause his downfall, and yet he cannot stop himself.
So this is based on the book, The French Connection. It came out a couple of years before that. It's actually a true story. The real cops of the French Connection, Eddie Egan and Sonny Grasso, are featured in the movie as well. And it's William Friedkin who probably got Best Director for this as well, right?
So the film won Best Picture, Best Actor for Gene Hackman,
yeah.
Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Editing, and yes, Best Director. Okay. He was also nominated for Roy Scheider's performance as a supporting actor, cinematography, and sound. And this film, what's interesting to me is you mentioned Egan. This movie is one of those movies I want there to be a movie about the making of this movie, because there's a fascinating story about Egan. After the success of this film, he went on to try and make his name in Hollywood, but he actually made some mistakes as a cop that got him sued, and there was a whole lawsuit involving him where he was like pretended to perhaps spend some time in jail. I would love to spend some time with that story, the making of this movie and the fallout of it as well. But as it stands, the movie itself is pretty exciting too.
There is a lot of great content to talk about the making of this movie, because it could have gone it could have gone shelved in the entire process. And yes, it's based on the true story. William Friedkin was known for making documentaries at the time, so I think he's the right fit to make this movie, because you want to very much look like documentary style. You very much want to have the camera like, okay, what do we have to go next? Okay, we're going here. Okay, we're going to talk about here. So it's not very much a lot of stiff, film. But it's a lot of like that gonzo filming we call now, where you're like, oh, we got to go here, now I got to go here. But I still regard this as one of the best edited films. It's the right pacing, everything is the right cut, everything is still, for me, one of the, out of all the awards, I still think it's best editing. It's just perfect.
Yeah, it's noticeable that it's intentional, but it feels at time like the cinematography is like a lost guy with a camera who's like, what's going to happen? Oh, there's something happening over here, and I love that feeling, because it does feel like documentary style then. And if you do it right. If you don't do it right, it feels like you don't know what you're doing with your movie. So it's a riskier version of cinematography, because it doesn't even work for everybody either. It's kind of that, it's a tricky thing to nail, is the intentional unintentionalness of making the film look like it's accidentally put together.
And we're going to talk about Gene Hackman winning an award. Now, Gene Hackman pretty much was hired because there was nobody else. Billy was trying to. This is the funny thing. Billy wanted Jackie Gleason, and then when Jackie he couldn't get him. He wanted Peter Boyle, and Peter Boyle said no, he wanted to do romance movies. Like,
well, Peter Boyle didn't want to be known for bigoted characters, because I guess he played a bigoted character a couple years prior, and didn't want that to be his thing. That he was playing just awful kind of people.
Yeah. We know from his, but we know what really happened. So it's pretty much because there's nobody else available that Gene Hackman got this role. There's a lot of friction, Billy and Gene Hackman. There's a lot of friction involved. I don't know if it's intentional, that because William Friedkin didn't really care for him, and then
he doesn't care for a lot of people.
No,
let's be honest.
But there's a lot of friction. And I'd like to just talk about that as well. So there's a lot of elements of this. The only really person that Billy wanted and got was Roy Scheider.
Yeah, because even with Fernando Rey, who plays Alan Charnier, this is great, is that he asked, he was like, I really like this Luis Buñuel performer from Belle de Jour, and can you get him for me? And they got the guy, and I think he met him at the airport, and he was like, this isn't the guy.
This is for
and he contemplated firing him, but it was like the movie it's going to start, like we've got to get this put together, and so he took a risk. And actually, you're going to end up enjoying him in the movie. But that's kind of where I get down to, like, William Friedkin. I just don't think he likes anybody. So
one thing I like about William Friedkin is how honest. He's very bluntly honest, but he lies so well too at the same time.
Yeah.
So a lot of his stories, like, is that really him? You know, I read the book, but I didn't really. Then the next one, I didn't read the book. Then he's like,
and then I read the book, but I didn't like it.
And then I
it's
didn't like it.
What is going on?
I didn't like it, but it was too much. It's like, and that's why I like Billy, because he could talk. I mean, I would love to get him on my show because it would just go.
Yeah. But then you'd have to like put like a warning at the beginning, like, may not be true.
Now this is a Christmas movie because in the beginning Gene Hackman is dressed like Santa,
and that actually happened. Now it's important to note that this movie is based on the book, that's based on a true story, but it's also like the way it morphs things together. Yeah, so the actual real detectives did dress up as Santa Claus, unrelated to this crime, I believe. Okay. It was just something else that they did. They actually got very successful because the criminals could always figure out who the undercover guy was. You know? So they said no one's ever going to suspect Santa, and so that actually is something that took place in real life, and it was like a record of kind of busts that took place because the undercover cop was dressed as Santa, and he would sing Jingle Bells to alert people to swarm, and so it actually did happen. It didn't happen related to this case as far as I'm concerned, but it took place actually, and I think that's kind of funny. Like it is. I like Santa action. I don't know. It's kind of funny to play off of that.
And then the whole gimmick of that Eddie Egan, he actually did use that pick your feet in Poughkeepsie, which throws off suspects when you interrogate them. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, the bad cop yells out random things to put you off guard. So when the good cop asks you a good question, you feel like it's something I didn't catch immediately, but the way it was utilized as the film kind of went on, and there's an interpretation too that Hackman's character, that Popeye Doyle, is not inherently as bigoted or as alcoholic as he appears. And that he's kind of always playing a character, because if he plays a cop that seems like he's on the edge, that you're going to believe him. I don't know if that was translated as well in the finished film, because I personally just didn't like the guy. Like, I took him at face value. He's a racist and alcoholic. So
it's a great character, but he's fascinating to watch. But it's like, you're a pain in the ass. Just to be a pain in the ass, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. But a lot of exterior. Now, I really appreciate a lot of exterior in the winter. A lot of shots in the winter of him standing outside, and you're like, it's not be cold. But that's a great contrast to the rich people, the rich drug dealers having the greatest feast of all time, and he's out there just having a cold coffee and stuff like that.
Yeah, the good guys are stuck like sitting in the grime, and the bad guys are in these like lovely castles and villas, and it's a nice juxtaposition, flipping on the head of how you would see these things taking place. The good guys should be taking care of business, but they're griming it up with the rest of us. So
I do like the beginning. It's almost like police sirens, but it's not really. It's like the music of police sirens. It's like just doo-doo. It's like the wire. All this busyness of like traffic and all that stuff. But it's like that emergency. You get the fullness of it right away. Very much of punch, and then of course French Connection. Everybody talks about is it a dirty movie? It's the weirdest title. I think they try to get rid of the title, right?
I don't think it's a good title. And we've had a series of kind of weird titles. Where we talked about Clute recently, which is like, at least in that case, I don't understand Clute's name being the title because it's not even based on a book called Clute. At least this is based on it, where the book was written as the French Connection. Yeah. I get it then, but it's not a good title. And it's one of those cases where it just changed the title.
And then there's a lot of documentary that changed the title from Doyle or something like that. So even the producers and the movie producers recognized they want to change the title. They just kept it. Yeah, because it doesn't really fit. What are we watching? Right. Yeah.
And maybe I wasn't around when this was going on, but maybe was the book a big deal? Maybe they kept it at that point, but I don't think the book was a particularly hot seller. Wasn't one like the Da Vinci Code where everyone had a copy of the French Connection they were reading. So I don't know why there was such a clinging to that. The sequel went on to be called The French Connection 2. Not only that, but there was a TV movie called Popeye Doyle that was made, I believe, in the 80s with Ed O'Neill playing the character that was supposed to launch a TV show. So even on the show, they changed it. Popeye Doyle was the name of the character, and so they just we're going to go with that. But yeah, The French Connection is just an odd title, and I waited the whole movie for it to really mean something more than it did. And there's French people in it. Okay.
Yeah. But there's nothing wrong with the sequel. I mean, it's Gene Hackman does his best is with shouting.
Yeah.
Which he does this movie. He does a lot of shouting.
Yeah.
So, and there's a lot of problems because a lot of people, because Eddie Egan had a really thick New York accent, and Gene Hackman did not have that in this movie. That kind of oh my God, is that going to take away? Because he didn't really have that authentic New York accent, authentic New York attitude that wanted project in this movie. They didn't think it was going to come out very well, but he won an award for it.
Well, and I think this is the case where, like, I think the movie is all the better for getting a good actor as opposed to someone who looks and acts like the real guy.
Yeah.
Like, this is a fictionalized account. It's okay that we don't stick to it 100%, because if you're going to this movie to get the real story, you're in the wrong place. Like, that's not how narrative fictional films should work. That's just my take. I don't think you need to stick to the playbook 100% if it's going to make a good movie. And I think if you searched out a guy who was going to fit the role, you might have gotten a guy that was as good as Gene Hackman, but it would have been very unlikely. It would have been tough to do because he's a perfect fit for the character. Hackman can play people that you don't like, that you still are good at what they do and you want to see them succeed. He did that with Poseidon Adventure. I didn't like him in Poseidon Adventure, but he was good at what he did. And it's like, he will lead me. So that's kind of the character.
Really, really awful, like Crimson Tide or something like that. Or,
Yeah.
Or Quick and the Dead.
Yeah.
It would be really awful. Moose Part, right? That was it for him.
That was awful for other reasons.
And that's the reason why he retired, is after doing that movie.
Yeah.
But I have a good friend. His name is Jim Byrne. He came from East Orange, New Jersey, and he always talked about there's nothing that he misses more but early 70s New York City. And you want to show, this movie shows you early 70s New York City, and he misses it. It is dirty. He goes, and like he says, I miss it because now it's turned into Disneyland. It's a tourist trap. Everything's cleaned up and nice. And this is the New York I love and I miss. Yeah, this dirty.
He only says that because he didn't get stabbed there.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, I know what you mean. It's a city in desperate need of a shower, but there ain't no faucet big enough for that city.
Right, but it's like New York City. If you've ever been, it's like one of those it's glamour and very expensive, and then you turn a couple blocks and all of a sudden it's desolate and dilapidated. Like, what the heck? Where did I get lost in?
Yeah.
So, and they shot a lot of it in those dilapidated areas.
Yeah, there's not a single set in this movie. There is no constructed sets because the cost, they couldn't afford to do it. It's well known that Friedkin only got to make this movie because
didn't get permits.
Someone else working at the studio said he had $2 million that he was available to spend on a picture, but he couldn't find anything that anyone could make a movie for under $2 million that he wanted to buy. And Friedkin said, if I make one under $2 million, will you let me? And so that was the thing, is he had to fit everything in there, so there was no money for sets. They had to just find locations they could shoot on. A lot of it was done guerrilla style, to the extent of like the famous chase scene. They didn't have the permits to shoot the chase scene, and it's like, how did you not serve time for killing someone?
Because that is a real authentic car accident. They hit a private citizen at the car. Right? Yeah. The only thing that was staged was the girl carrying the cart. That was staged.
Yeah.
Everybody thinks that was the fake one. No, everything else is really authentic.
I'm surprised there wasn't more accidents. I'm honestly surprised he didn't go to jail for killing someone. I mean, really, like, wow, that's a bad call as like an early filmmaker, because it turned out great. The movie turns out great, but again, what a terrible call to make for your career in making movies. And it's just the risk paid off.
I know the danger of mounting a camera on the front bumper of a car, and then you're going to film it. Hopefully you don't get hit. Yeah.
And what's funny was we all talk about the famous chase scene. It's so well documented. People say it's the best chase ever put to film. So when I watched the movie, I was like, all right, it'll be fine. Yeah. I was really surprised that it worked for me as well as it did. And part of it is because it's not a traditional chase of two guys in a car. It's one guy's in a sub and the other guy's in a car, and he's chasing the train. And it's like, what? Like, how is that going to work on a movie? Like, and when it started off that way, I was like, obviously he's going to get in a car, right? Yeah. Right. Like, and I was just so in shock that it worked as well as it did for a chase scene of that style.
It's really edited. And like I'll go back to it. The chasing is edited really well, because then you he gasses it, and you get a cut of his foot stomping on the gas, because that takes time to set the camera so you can show him, put on the cat, film that and everything. But it's spliced up perfect. Even when the train hits the other compartment, then you have everybody crashing over. So it's edited fantastic. Yeah.
Well, and then there's that and the fun part is that it's just as engaging to watch what the bad guy's doing in that scene as it is to watch what the good guy's doing. They're both doing completely different things because one guy has to drive. So his whole thing has to be driving ferociously, which is crazy and dangerous. But then you get the guy on the train who is pointing a gun at people. He's firing it. He's holding the driver hostage, and just everything. And and it comes to a stop at its announced stop, and then he's like, no, keep it going. So you think the scene's going to end there, and he's like, no, keep it going, and it starts back up again, and you're like, oh no, it felt like a ride. You know, I mean, for all the criticizing Martin Scorsese does of superhero movies as thrill rides, this was a heck of a thrill ride right here.
Right. Yeah. So I'm glad. Did you enjoy the movie?
I did enjoy it.
Yeah.
Here's my big problem with it, and it's not ruining the film for me in any way, shape, or form. But I will say this: I'm not a fan of ambiguous endings. And this film is not a completely ambiguous ending because you get title cards telling you what happened. You also got a sequel that is not based on the true events, but it's like a continuation of the story in some ways. And there's like only one part of this ending is ambiguous. I just would wish that you made a choice, you know, because he won't talk about what happened in the ending. He said it's meaningless, but it might mean something, and it's like, okay,
yeah, right.
I don't care for most ambiguous endings. So this is one small problem I had with a good ending because I really like the ending. It's my favorite part of the movie.
For me, I think he's just shooting at shadows. He's just that crazy. He just doesn't. He's upset. That
I'm going to take him at his word that it's ultimately a meaningless gunshot. But like everything at the ending of the film, because I think the beginning of the film we talk about how cool that Santa chase was, but like it's the chase scene with the train in the car, followed by that really great disassembly scene that used some of the people that actually worked on the case in the scene, and then that great ending that complicates things because it makes our protagonist even more unlikable by kind of pulling a pledge moment.
You got that scene where you block off the road and he's approaching, it looks like you got him, and he's got that smirky little face, I got you, and then they get away, right?
How did you not plan to cover him on the back end? Anyway,
Yeah,
that's not important.
Right.
But yeah, it reminded me a lot of the Pledge, where our lead character is so incensed and so passionate about finding the answer that he's willing to make all the wrong calls and put people in danger.
Yes. Yeah.
It's a good double feature if you don't mind being depressed by endings, because there's a really high level of depression from these two endings.
It's not a nice sunny day anywhere in this movie either, too. So, and it's still like one of my top 20 favorite movies. It works. Yeah.
I'd like to check out because I hadn't seen the first film. In fact, the only reason I have this movie is because it came packaged with The Hustler. That I picked up because I had The Color of Money and I needed to get The Hustler so I could watch The Color of Money with The Hustler. So this movie is packaged together with that. That's the only reason I have it.
That's weird.
And if you are looking for a physical media version of the film, avoid the 2009 Blu-ray because William Friedkin changed up the color grading without consulting his cinematographer, who claimed that the color grading looked much more colder and bluer, and he called the film atrocious. The 2009 Blu-ray has a really different color palette to it, apparently. It was fixed with the 2012 release, but if you're looking for a physical media version of the film, I would avoid that 09 version because it's a mistake.
I just like this, because it's the darky, grimy,
I like the way
very,
the movie looks.
what kind of yucky green.
So now I have to be careful. I can't upgrade my movie to Blu-ray unless I'm very careful about figuring out which version I'm getting.
Even that dinner scene, everybody's really all-fashioned and dressed up, and still kind of looks kind of dirty.
Yeah, I like the cinematography that we got with, I think it's Owen Roizman. Yeah,
he uses it a lot.
Who did Network, another film that I think kind of has a. It's funny because that film has a shine to it because it's a network, production. So a lot of the shiny environments, but it's still kind of a grimier feel.
It does
to the cinematography, and of course he did The Exorcist as well, which starts out cold but bright, and then slowly morphs into a really depressing and dark, film. So Roizman knows how to play with kind of coldness, but also heat. He knows how to play with bright colors, dark colors. Roizman's kind of a jack of all trades in terms of it. He's got a visual style to him, but he knows how to use certain elements to his work.
I think this is the right setting for him to use because he can do Gonzo, but intentionally looks like documentary. But you can set up your scenes and everything. You have to do those cut scenes of like your hands and everything.
Yeah, and one of the scenes I actually particularly liked how his cinematography aided the performance was in the bar when they're gonna go and it feels like these cops are holding up this black bar,
right?
And they're coming in and it's kind of a scene where we're not sure if we're supposed to feel empathetic towards one character or another. We don't really know what's going on in that scene. I was very lost, and he pulls the guy aside, and it turns out to be his informant. And the way they break the tension of that scene was like, wait, that's what's happening? I almost collapsed in my chair because I was like, I don't like this guy.
Yeah.
And I don't like the way that the shot is making me seem to think he's my hero, and it plays you kind of, it twists you really well with that, and I was surprised.
But he uses long shots.
Yes,
to
that's
make sure
true
you
too.
see the entire bar. I think it's like a rundown bar. They just filled it up like a warehouse thing to make it look like a bar, right?
Yeah, that's another one where I'm surprised that's not a set, because it feels so constructed with what it needs to be for that scene, and they must have found a place.
And there's nothing wrong with the sequel. It's just more amped up, and it's over in France.
Yeah, I got a buddy that suggested he's got both of them, and he's like, "Well, now you've seen the first one, I'll bring over the second one." You check it. I'm one of those completionists. I got to at least watch the sequel, even if it's garbage and I don't want to buy it. I got to at least see the rest of the films. So I'm going to. I'll probably hunt down that Popeye Doyle TV show and just check out that episode. But I'm not expecting much there. The film actually still holds a 98% on Rotten Tomatoes,
which is pretty And
it's fun to note that it was one of Akira Kurosawa's favorite films. Which, when you hear it on the surface, you're like, "Huh."
What?
But then you kind of think about the way that he used narrative too, and the way that he sometimes didn't have likable protagonists, and you kind of like, I can see.
Throne of Blood is not a hero role.
Yeah, so like I can kind of see now why it is, but it took me like a couple hours of like ruminating on that, so it's kind of a fun thing. But
all right, have you seen it?
Yeah. Do you prefer the original film? Do you prefer the sequel? Do you prefer the Ed O'Neill TV show? Maybe there's someone out there. Let us know in the comments section down below. Is this your favorite William Friedkin film? Is there any other Friedkin films we should cover next season?
There's one in the 80s for sure.
Oh.
To Live and Die.
Oh.
Yeah.
The film where he tried to best his chase sequence with another chase sequence.
That's another marquee for him, yeah.
Okay. Well, let us know if you want us to cover that during season 4 of the show by commenting down below with your thoughts on the film. One of our favorite things to do is talk about comments and kind of read comments and see the people that are interested in discussing the show further. It's one of our favorite things to do. It's almost as much fun as watching the movie itself. And while you're down there, don't forget to like, subscribe, as Nick pointed out. Check out that Patreon as well. There's still a couple days left. If you join the Patreon, you will get, at any tier, you will get a January Patreon selection. Do that by clicking the link down in the description, and you can find out more information about joining the Patreon that way. Thank you guys for a wonderful season 3. We've done a lot of movie discussions. We've talked some weird movies. We've talked some great movies. We've talked some bad movies. We've talked some blood diners.
Really bad movies.
Thank you guys for joining us on this wild journey that was season 3, and we'll see you in January. You can check out all my film reviews on goatfilmreviews.com.
You can find my podcast, St. Paul Filmcast, anywhere you find podcasts. And once again, thanks for watching.
Yep. Happy holidays.